Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. This is the fourth video in the CS7.2 Case Sorter build series. And in this video, we're going to take all the stuff that we've built in the previous videos and we're going to mount it to the pipe and get the system completely set up and ready to run. This is one of the videos I regretted not doing for the CS7.1 series, but some good things have come out of that because in the community, a lot of folks went different ways and we kind of got to discover what was the easiest and best solution. And so hopefully we can cover all that today. So let's just start off with what I'm recommending as the best at this point, but you're free to do whatever you want in the sense that this is your build and make it work for you. So what I have here is a piece of plywood. It's a 3/4 inch plywood and it's roughly 20 by 22 inches. And I've attached to it the Steel Tech structural flange, and it's about 2.5 inches in, centered on the back side of it. And then this is Steel Tech 3/4 inch pipe. So the Steel Tech stuff you could buy online or you can buy it from Lowe's. I've got this at Lowe's. I think it's about 25 bucks for the flange and the pipe. At least when I bought it, I think $20 for the pipe, $5 for the flange. The OD on this 3/4 inch is 1.050, which is the same as your black iron pipe and your schedule 30 or 40, even your galvanized pipe. So you have lots of options. Here's another option for an example. This is the black iron pipe, and you can find this. This one is threaded, and then it has the iron flange that's threaded on. So this could be bolted as well to a piece of plywood. I've cut this one to, I believe, let's see, 2 feet, so 24 inches. That's the height that I needed for my sorter. There's lots of options here though. So let me show you another kind of funny one that you might want to use. Get that out of the way here. So I had this old office chair. And so on this, I was able to attach the pipe, and you can see this is a standard 3/4 inch galvanized pipe. Brackets slide over it fine, and it fits pretty nicely. I could drill a hole and make a shim, but this would give me some sort of rolling option if I wanted something rolling around my shop. My shop is too small to have something like this, but if you had an old office chair sitting around, the sky's the limit on what you can do with this. Okay, so for this video, we're just going to go ahead and use the plywood with the Steel Tech pipe. And what we're going to need as far as tools, I recommend having a drill with the appropriate bit for the M6 bolts. If you bought the kit, the M6 by 30 bolts are what we're going to use to mount everything along with the wing nuts. If you didn't, then hopefully you've sourced the right length. 30 millimeters is approximately the right length, although you could go a little shorter, a little longer, it's probably fine. We're going to go ahead and start. And the first thing we need to know is the height of the bottom bracket. And so for this, I'm going to get one of my sorter bins and just use that as a measurement. And so the sorter is going to go on first. We should be able to just slide this over the pipe. And so the bins you can see can go a little higher than the base of the sorter. Or if you want more drop, you can put them up a bit higher, and that lets you have some clearance under the bin. Now for me, I think I'm going to probably I'll probably run my bin just a little lower here. Or my sorter just a bit lower. Gives me a little bit more room up high. So right around in that area should work fine. And then we just need to go ahead and put the couple bolts on. There's not really a right or wrong way to do this. Just thread them through the holes and put the wing nuts on. All right, and you probably don't want to over tighten these at first. We're going to have to do a little bit of adjusting on the arm, but we just kind of want to know where our starting point is. Now, one thing I didn't mention you actually have an option. I decided to go sorter bracket first because I'm going to put my electronics box in between. So my next bracket will be my electronics mount bracket, but I've noticed a couple of the early builders have used they've mounted the electronic box a little bit lower. I'm going to go ahead and keep it in the middle here, but the second bracket is the electronics box mount bracket, and this is the one that we're going to go ahead and just dump next onto the post, and it faces the opposite direction because you'll have your electronics box mounted to the back. I suppose you could mount it to the side or any way you want, but in this case we're going to mount it to the back. You'll notice these brackets have channels built into the back or front of them. Let's see if I can show you that too. There's a channel back here, and those are your wire channels. So we want to make sure that those channels sort of stay aligned however we decide to mount so that we can run our wiring through those channels. So in this case, we'll go ahead and put our bracket on. I had to raise this up just a bit because the wing nut wouldn't turn because it was hitting this bracket. So I raised it maybe 6 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch, something like that. So here's kind of what that looks like. Here's a close-up of that. A little bit of space there. And next we'll go ahead and put on our classifier. So for the classifier, there is a drop nozzle, and we have to align that drop nozzle with the drop tube. In fact, this should come around this a little bit so that the case transfers smoothly. That one's a little bit tighter for some reason, not sure, but it's all right, it's working. So for here, let me see if I can bring this camera over and we'll take a better look. So we want to align that drop nozzle so it slides right into that tube. Now I kind of got lucky here because when I set the bracket earlier, when I did this set screw, I must have hit it just right. But typically you'd loosen this up and you'd adjust the length in and out until you get this pipe exactly lined up. And so this is working, there's no binding. It seems like it's working well. So that's about where you want it. Okay, so next we have to put our feed tube on top. And so on my particular feed bracket, I actually installed the thumb screws. These are just M3 thumb screws that you can buy from Amazon or AliEx, pretty cheap. I prefer those over the socket head, which comes in the kit, but they were a little bit unavailable when I tried to get these for the kit, or the price was too high to include them. It just didn't make sense. So if you want thumb screws, you can buy these pretty cheap, or you can make your own. So there are printable thumb screw caps. Let me show you what those look like. And once they're done printed, they look, you kind of glue them in. They're kind of a press fit, but I actually put a little bit of epoxy in there as well. So you can print your thumb screws from the repo. You'll find these in the CS7.2 repo. All right, moving on. So this bracket, there's no wiring that runs through this, so you can install it either way. I'm going to put mine channel down. You can also print the bracket without channels on it. For this particular piece, I printed all 3 with the channels, but you might get a little cleaner look if you went with the clean bracket that has no mount points and no channel in it. That's a preference thing. All right, so that one's pretty loose. We'll go ahead and put our screws in. Okay, we don't want this to be too tight. We want to be able to kind of move it, so just enough tension to move this thing around. All right, so the next thing we've got to do is align the drop tube with the first position on the wheel. So I'm going to move the camera over here so we can get a better look, or perhaps I will move over there. Okay, this gives us a little bit better view. And so what we want to do is we've printed our caliber specific drop tube, or feed tube rather. This is the 9mm, and this will slide through the bracket, and it should sit all the way down. And then I'll just tighten down my thumb screw until it locks in place. And what we want here, our first position is the one next to the gear. And what we want is this bracket to be lined up so that brass drops directly into that spot. So I've loosened this thumb screw. Let's see if I can, a little bit off here. This thumb screw here is the one I'm using to kind of adjust that. So let me grab a couple pieces of brass and we'll just drop them in there. So right now this is way too high. We want this to sit up approximately 1 to 2, maybe 2 or 3 millimeters above the brass. So if we get a look at that, let me take this off the mount, see if we can focus this a little bit better. So I'm going to turn this wheel by hand. So you could see how the brass sort of moved from left to right. We want this to be centered a little bit better. So that's just about perfect. It's dropping straight down. It's a little higher than it needs to be. So I might lower that down a little bit more. You don't want to get it too low. Let's see. But that's just about right. So I'll go ahead and lock this in place. It's already nice and tight. And then we lock our thumb screws or our wing nuts down a little bit tighter, and then double check everything. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so at this point we have enough of the system in place to get everything wired up so that we can test. Now obviously missing is the feed mechanism, or the collator, the brass collator, and we'll put that on at the very end. But for now, let's get our system wired up, and then we'll talk about the options for the feed. So I'm going to move the camera over to this side so that we can get a better look at the wiring. Okay, I think this will work. So let's start by putting our electronics box on the mount point here. That just sets there. And then we just need to start plugging in our wires. So in this particular case, I'm starting down here at the classifier, and you have the option. So there's a zip tie mount point here, so you could zip tie it this way. You could come up and then through the wire channel, depending on what you find to be the cleanest approach. For now, I'm going to go direct because I think I'm going to add a little bit of wire management tubing here to keep it all together. Keep in mind we have this wire management cap. So I'm going to be running most of my wires, I believe, just through this side of the cap. So I'm going to start with the camera USB, and so it's going to come all the way over here. Then next we'll take our camera wires. So here, if you bought the kit, you're going to get a blue and yellow wire for the fan, yellow being positive, blue being negative, and red and black for the light. So they're also color coded here on the label, as you can see. So once you have them clicked in, they won't move very well. That means that they've been captured by the spring tension. All right, next we're going to do our homing sensor wire. So it's not the sort homing, this is actually the feed homing on the other side. So we're all color coded here, black or white, black, and red. Okay, and now we have our motor wire. This is the feed motor wire. Again, we're color coded, so we'll just plug all the colors in where they go. Now, if you need to remove one of these for some reason, the way you do that is by pushing the white button in, and it will release. It will make it very easy to release. Let go of the button, and then you can just pop this back in until it clips. Green, red, blue, black. Looks like we're good there. Finally, we have one more wire coming from the classifier, and that is our feed proximity sensor, which is here. And blue, black, and brown, they're color coded. In this case, signal is actually the black wire. It's marked, well, it's marked white here, but that was a mistake in the labeling. Nothing I can do about it now. So we have brown and blue. Brown is our hot. And that's all the wiring from our classifier base. And you see we have a lot of extra wire here. You'll notice in the prox kit that I included extra ferrules. So if, in fact, you wanted to shorten this, you have to have a ferrule crimper, but you could go ahead and cut this to length and then recrimp on the ferrules. I gave one of each color. For my build, I'm not going to do that right now, but that's what I would end up doing because we don't really need this much extra wire hanging around. Technically, the same goes for everything else here. I'm also selling on my store a complete ferrule kit with all the colors. So if you wanted to shorten everything and recrimp, these are very easy to crimp on. All right, so let's go ahead and now attach our sorter cables. So these I would come up through the bottom bracket here. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera. Yeah, it looks like you can see that, but we'll come right back through and we'll go ahead and plug in. There's just two cables here, which is our sensor and our motor. So sensor first, white, black, and red. And our motor again. Just make sure they're all seated well. And that's it. So we're not going to hook up AirDrop for this video, but if you have the air solenoid, there's an AirDrop mod. This is where you would connect your 12 volt and your ground to your air solenoid directly, so you don't need any extra controllers. And then, you know, your air would run and attach onto the sort bracket. So at this point, this is wired up, pretty much ready to go and connect up to power in a computer. So let's go ahead and do that, but I'm gonna just stuff all of this right now into, before we'll come back and look at some of the wire management strategies. But for now, and I have a feeling a lot of guys will do this because it seems like a lot of people are sort of impatient, like myself. And there's no problem with this. You just kind of hide everything underneath. And then just make sure it all passes through that wire management hole. So rather than fight that, let's get rid of some wire. I might as well cover it. So we're going to shorten up our proximity sensor because it's the bulk of the wire here. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is cut the proximity sensor to length just a little. I'm going to give myself a little extra to play with. There we go. We need to get my strippers. We'll go ahead and strip. You want about 8 millimeters stripped off of each one of these. And then we're just twisting. We'll go ahead and get the ferrules. I don't have the original bag, but if you look at the bag your prox came in, it should have one of each color. So black, you just pop that over there. Blue. And brown. And then we'll take our crimper, just pop each one of those in. And those are crimped on, hopefully. Let's see if they, looks like they're good and tight. So we'll go ahead and put those in. That should give us a little bit more space to work with now. So if you want to do this right, you'd probably zip tie all the extra leads up instead of scrunching them like I'm doing, but that indeed did clear up enough space for this thing to sit down. And I would come back and revisit that, maybe shorten the camera cable. You can't really shorten the USB, but you could shorten the light and fan cable, any of the motor cables. For this little length, you can buy the webbing and it will just wrap around. I can cover those wires up a little bit better as well. If you're concerned about that, you can also use a zip tie mount point here to mount that up a little bit better. Hey guys, I want to do a little follow-up on the cable management that I've done so far. And I did go through and shorten up all the cables. There's still a little excess, that I'm pushing down, but not nearly as bad. I didn't want to, you can't, it's a pain to add, so it's easy to take away. I didn't want to take away too much at first, but all of this now fits easily under the box. I added a little bit of the wire management webbing, so you can see some cables, but we have a fix. Oh, another thing is I ran the power wire up through the brackets, and the reason I did this is because I was working with one of the other contributors on the forum, and we kind of came up with this idea for wire management. And I went and printed those out, and they're these clips here. And so these are super easy. You just snap them to the post. You can rotate them if you want. And so this is a shorter piece, but when you print it, you just need to, measure the distance you need and then change the Z height. and it will print to whatever size you need. So I'm going to go ahead and put the other two on here. I don't think I can do it with one hand. And just like that, it's all done. So all you're going to see is a couple pieces of wire here and there. And all in all, fairly clean install. Now let's head back to our regularly scheduled programming. All right, well, let's get our computer connected, and we'll do a couple tests there and see if anything is messed up or if we broke any wires or anything like that. But the CS7.2 build is significantly easier, at least in the electronics portion, as it's mostly just plug and play. So I'm going to get the computer set up and we'll take a look. Okay, so if you bought the kit, you have a USB cable, USB-C cable. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug that into my computer and into the box here. Let's go ahead and launch the Arduino Studio, or the Arduino IDE. If you haven't installed this yet, you need to go to the Arduino site and download and install that, as this is a great troubleshooting tool. So mine actually loaded up with the firmware already, but you don't need this. All we're actually going to be doing is connecting. So you'll choose the port. In my case, it's COM3, and you'll set the board type to Arduino Uno. So if it's an unknown port, you would just select it here. You could type Uno, choose it, and then OK. And so now what I'm going to do is use Tools, Serial Monitor. And what we should see is the system reset for a second there, but I get a ready command. So now I can do a couple tests here. So the first test I'm going to do is XF0, which forces a feed. And as you see, we had one successfully feed. I'm going to go ahead and grab a handful of brass and just throw it in the feed tube. Once we get our collator set up, this is going to be much nicer. We'll cover that just in a bit, but it looks like so far everything looks to be working. Now I'm going to do sort to 2, and I can see the sorter is moving. Sort to 0, and it came back. And so now I can do, I'm going to type a 0, that's going to make a feed, and then a 1, that's going to feed, and the next time I feed, it's going to move to slot 1. So there's a 1 slot delay. I'll go ahead and do a 2 here. And you can see, oh, we missed because we didn't have a bucket. And I'll go back to 0, so it's going to go to 2, now back to 0. So it looks like everything is functioning properly here. If you have all your buckets in place, you can run a command like this, test 10, and it will do 10 tests. So let me throw some of these in place here. So now we have basically a full flower of buckets. I don't think they're quite aligned yet, but we'll cover that a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and do a test. I'm going to put a few more pieces of brass up here in the tube. And we'll do a test 10. Okay, so that went pretty fast. It says it's waiting for brass. I guess we already used the pieces we had, so success. let's move on and we'll do a little bit of tweaking and tuning on the system here. One thing I noticed was that it was feeding stuff into the wrong slot. In fact, it was moving on to the next one before it was done. And so that was a setting that I had in my firmware. And I'm going to go ahead and update that from 100 to 400. And from there, we'll go ahead and push the firmware. So this is the latest CS7.2 firmware. Okay, so now if we do another test, we should have a little bit more delay built in. And that should allow time for the brass to clear the sorter tube before it moves on to the next bin. Okay, so needed a slight adjustment there. And we need to back this up. So I'm not getting really good feed yet. I guess I didn't have this adjusted properly. So I'm adjusting the feed arm back a little bit, or maybe it got moved in that last jam. Okay, so it looks like it's feeding. So I'm going to go ahead and set a longer test. Well, we'll do test 20. And then I can start dropping. And the sorter is moving. When you have test mode, the sorter just moves randomly. It's really just to test general functionality. It's not sorting anything per se. But this one looks like it's working pretty well now. So now I would say it's time for us to maybe fix a couple of alignment issues with the buckets where we want our 0 to be. So I'm going to go ahead and hit home sorter. And you'll see it kind of goes back to where it thinks 0 is. And let's take a closer look at that. So I actually think that's pretty good. It is lined up with the notch. So I'm fine with that being my 0 slot. And I just need to move all these buckets a little bit. So we'll do sort to 1. And that looks good. Sort to 2. I'll line my bucket up a bit more. Sort to 3, and you get the idea. So we would go through all of these to get our buckets aligned. They should pretty much align up with these notches though, and that seems to be the case. So I think we're all set there. Okay, so before we attach our collator, let's make sure everything else is working. We're going to go ahead and launch the software. Oh, and before we launch the software, let's go ahead and stop the Arduino Studio. We don't really need that open anymore. We can't have two things connected at the same time. So we'll go ahead and stop that and then start our sorter software here. And let's go ahead and check our web camera and see what we're working with here. So I don't have any brass under the camera. And now I do. Okay, so the feed worked. I should be able to move, sorry, wrong one. We should be able to move this and see our sorter move. And that looks good. If our brass is if our image of the brass is too bright, we can change our camera brightness here now. I'm going to put mine right around 120. In this version of the software, the fine-tuning screen is here. In future versions that are under construction, we'll have a whole section here for camera and imaging. But here's where I would go and capture the image. This is hybrid mode, so I've set my radius, which is this red circle. And then I should be able to feed and make sure stuff is falling within that circle. So I'm still not quite feeding reliably here, and I think my bracket needs to pop out just a bit more. Let's see. Seems to be better. So I'm just checking to make sure everything is good image-wise and that everything is feeding. Much better here. Perfect. And I can't feed anymore because we have no more brass. Okay, let's talk about how we feed this beast. So I have a Dillon case feeder, as you can probably see in the background here. And you could definitely use any kind of case feeder that you have available. There's a number of different brackets and adapters in the repo and in the community contributions in the 7.1 repo. You can also make your own. There's a few recommendations here. Some people like to use springs to feed. Others will use like the tubing that comes with the Dillon. I think I have a piece back here. And you can bend this if you need to heat it up with a heat gun and bend it. Although I like to just keep it short and a straight drop if possible. For this build, I'm going to recommend using the BF556 feeder. There's lots of options out here, but the BF556 is well supported, open source case feeder that you can 3D print yourself. I have one here. This one I've set up for this particular project. There's a bracket here that's in the repo that will sit on the top of your pipe, and adjustable angle. And also I've created a 45-degree drop funnel for 9mm, which is what I sort the most. But this guy just sits on top of the pipe, over the top of the feeder. And then what I'm using is, there's an adapter, and these you can find. This is a 15mm spring, 1mm by 15. I bought this on Ali. I bought like a meter or two of this stuff, $15, $10-15 on AliExpress. You can buy it on Amazon. There's all kinds of spring options here that you can buy. The spring seems to work. You could just as easily cut this to size to fit in between these two parts. But this particular bracket with the BF556-300 actually positions it so it's straight up and down. So here, all right, and then tuck that up and under. I probably should shorten this wire. I don't need it to be this long. This end, I just have a little slip over piece. This is also available in the repo at Clamps, but Shibi's created, one of the contributors in the project has created another snap lock type funnel tube that you can use. This particular one will just fit in there, and I'll go ahead and lock it down. So for me, this is the height I needed, and the spring actually doesn't have any tension on it right now. If I wanted to change stuff to just lower, I could lower everything just a little bit. That would probably straighten this out, which I'm going to go ahead and do real quick here because I think that's how I want to have it set up. Okay, here's a quick look at the setup here. On the 5.6, we have our funnel. We have our sensor here that tells us when the brass is up to the top so it doesn't keep feeding. These are the twist lock with the spring. These are in the 5.56 BF556 repo. And then following the spring down, there's a spring clamp that's smooth on one end, and so it clamps into the feed tube. Like I said, I think Shibi has the equivalent of this for here so that actually it can twist lock into the drop tube as well. I am just using the smooth ones for now. But that's what our BF556 collator looks like. This one has a custom wheel on it. It's seen a good amount of use and works pretty well. So at this point, we're all set up and ready to do a run with the software. So let's jump into that real quick and see what else we need to discover here. Well, all right, that concludes this video, this build. We have our system up and running. Everything looks to be working properly. We still need to train our model and do a few other things with the software. That will be covered in a separate video rather. And for now, I think we're good to go as far as this system goes. We can do a little bit more wire management. Definitely join the forums. If you're not in the forum already, you should be. That's where you can get a lot of advice and see other people's good ideas about how they handled some of the situations. All right, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time.